Beneath the bustling streets of London, hidden just out of sight, lies Aldwych Station, a place that never quite closed. At least, not in the way you'd expect. Its tiled walls, weathered and faded by decades of silence, seem to whisper stories of forgotten footsteps and distant echoes. Though trains no longer stop here, and the station no longer welcomes daily commuters, something about the place holds on. It holds on to the faint hum of life, the residual breath of a time when the underground was its own city, a labyrinth of steel and shadow. The air is cool and damp, carrying the subtle scent of old stone and dust mingled with the faintest trace of oil and rust. On rainy nights, when the surface streets are slick with water and the sky heavy with cloud, the sound of distant drops makes its way down the ventilation shafts, blending with the soft murmur of the city above. It is here, in this quiet twilight between light and dark, that Aldwych breathes in a rhythm unlike any other station in London. Though officially closed to the public since 1994, the station's corridors remain intact, untouched by redevelopment. For those who know where to look, the heavy iron gates stand slightly ajar, as if inviting the curious to slip through and step into a world suspended between past and present. The platforms are empty, but not lifeless. The echoes of hurried footsteps, the shuffling of newspapers, and distant conversations still seem to drift through the air, carried on the stale breath of the underground. It's not a place of ghosts, exactly. Rather, it is a place of memory, preserved in the stillness. Staff who once worked here speak quietly of the station's stubborn hold on time. How the clocks seem to tick a little slower, and how sometimes when the night is deep and the city is hushed, they hear sounds that shouldn't be there. A train rolling softly in from the darkness, a faint whistle lost in the tunnels, footsteps fading away into silence. These moments are brief, elusive. They vanish the instant you turn your head. The station resists explanation, existing in a liminal space where reality blurs with recollection. It is as if Aldwych holds on to its purpose, unwilling to let go of the daily rhythm it once carried. For those who linger, the station becomes a quiet companion, a refuge for thoughts and memories, an echo chamber for the passing of time itself. Outside, the city carries on in its endless dance of noise and light. But below, in the depths of Aldwych, time is suspended, caught between the past and an uncertain future, waiting patiently for the next curious soul to listen to its quiet, unyielding story. Asterisk, underneath the surface, the station's silence feels almost deliberate. If the space itself holds a secret it isn't quite ready to share. The faint flicker of dimmed light above cast long shadows across the worn tiles, highlighting the curves of the arches and the peeling paint that reveal years of neglect. Each step on the platform echoes gently, a soft reminder that while the trains no longer stop here, the station still listens. There are stories tied to this place that ripple quietly among London's underground circles. Tales of workers who remember the rhythms of the old signal boxes, the faint crackle of the radio static during late-night shifts, and the hush that falls over the tunnels just before dawn. Some speak of Aldwych as a living entity's walls, imbued with the memories of every passenger who passed through, every hurried glance exchanged, every moment of waiting. It is as though the station itself has absorbed the energy of 1,000 silent journeys. In the 1980s, Aldwych was already a ghost of a station, used mostly for training and film shoots. It was during that time that several staff members reported strange occurrences, not the sort that send chills down your spine, but subtle, unsettling moments. Doors closing by themselves, the soft murmur of voices that seemed to come from nowhere, the sensation of being watched when no one else was around. None of these events were violent or overtly frightening. Instead, they were like whispers of the past brushing past the present, teasing the edges of perception. The architecture contributes to the station's unique atmosphere. The curved tunnels and narrow passageways create a sense of enclosure and isolation, yet there is an undeniable beauty in the way the space feels both protective and confining. In the deeper recesses, the faint scent of damp earth and old metal lingers, a reminder that this place once hummed with life and purpose. Time has stretched here, bending and folding in ways that are difficult to describe. There's also the matter of the trains themselves. Though no public service has run through Aldwych for decades, the occasional maintenance train still passes through the tunnels nearby. On rare nights, those who wait in the shadows swear they can hear the distant rumble of a ghostly carriage, its wheels turning softly on the tracks, disappearing into the darkness as quietly as it came. Whether it's the mind playing tricks or the station's own echo, no one can say for sure. For those who find themselves below ground, away from the city's relentless pulse, Aldwych offers a moment of suspended time, place where the boundaries between memory and reality blur, where silence speaks louder than words. It waits quietly, patiently, as if inviting anyone who dares to listen to hear its story, one not of hauntings or phantoms, but of a place that never truly closed. Asterisk, the deeper you walk into Aldwych Station, the more the ordinary rules of time and place begin to lose their grip. The rhythmic drip of water from unseen cracks echoes through the empty tunnels, mixing with the faint hum of ventilation shafts long unused, but still breathing life into the cold air. It's a place that invites quiet contemplation, a refuge from the relentless rush above ground, where every sound and shadow feels magnified by the stillness. Even the walls seem to lean in, as if eager to share secrets only the patient can hear. Faded posters cling stubbornly to the curved walls, remnants of forgotten campaigns, their colors muted by years of dust and damp. They speak of an era when the station buzzed with movement and purpose, when rush hour was a torrent of footsteps in hurried conversations. Now, the silence has settled like a soft blanket, thick and comforting, yet tinged with an indefinable melancholy. People who have ventured into the station for film shoots or tours often describe a strange sensation, a fleeting sense of presence, as though the space is alive with the memories of those who once passed through it. It is not fear, but something more elusive, like the feeling of walking into a room moments after a conversation has ended, catching the echoes of laughter and whispers hanging in the air. The station holds on to these fragments, preserving them. In the stillness, during the cold, rainy nights when London seems wrapped in mist, the soundscape of Aldwych changes subtly. The distant rumble of the city fades, replaced by the delicate patter of rain tapping against ventilation grills far above. Occasionally, the soft hiss of air from the tunnels breaks the silence, reminiscent of a train sigh as it slips away into the depths. These sounds weave together to create an atmosphere that is both haunting and strangely staff, who worked in the station's final days, often mention the uncanny feeling that the station itself was reluctant to let go. Even after the official closure, equipment would sometimes operate on its own for brief moments. Lights flickering, or the faintest vibration running through the rails beneath their feet. It was as if Aldwych still dreamed of the crowds it once served, unwilling to surrender completely to silence. Walking through the station today, it's easy to forget the surface world outside the honking cars, flashing lights, and endless tide of people. Here, time slows, and the past seeps through the cracks like water pooling beneath the tracks. Aldwych Station, with its quiet strength and lingering presence, remains a place of memory and mystery, a station that never truly closed, waiting silently beneath London's streets for the next curious soul to listen. Asterisk, as the years have passed, Aldwych Station's story has woven itself into the fabric of London's underground mythology, not as a place of frightful hauntings, but as a silent witness to the city's ever-shifting rhythms. It is a station caught in time, a physical memory carved into the stone and steel beneath the bustling streets. The whispers of the past seem to settle like dust in the air, gentle and persistent. Those who have spent time there speak of an almost reverent calm, a peacefulness that contrasts sharply with the chaos just above. It's a quiet sanctuary where the clatter of footsteps and the rush of air from speeding trains are replaced by the soft, steady heartbeat of the underground's forgotten corridors. The rusted signage and faded advertisements are like messages from another era, patiently waiting to be discovered and understood. Interestingly, Aldwych was originally opened in 1907, part of a plan to relieve congestion in central London. Yet, despite its purpose, the station never grew into the bustling hub its creators had envisioned. Passenger numbers remained low, and eventually it was deemed too costly to keep open. But unlike other closed stations that were sealed and forgotten, Aldwych retained a quiet existence, often used for training exercises and as a film location, its vintage look preserved by neglect. This in-between status, neither fully active nor completely abandoned, gives Aldwych its uncanny atmosphere. The lights flicker occasionally, shadows fall just so against the walls, and the faint sounds of unseen movements suggest a place still very much alive, even if only in spirit. Staff who worked there recall moments of inexplicable stillness where the station seemed to hold its breath, as if listening to its own memories. Some visitors say that standing on the platform, especially during a rainy night, you can almost feel the pulse of the city above, muted and distant, like a heartbeat felt through layers of earth. It is a reminder that Aldwych, though silent, is never truly isolated. It remains connected to London's vast underground network, a forgotten thread in a tapestry that stretches beyond sight. The station's story is not one of ghosts or specters, but of endurance. It is a place where time slows, where history clings to the bricks and mortar, and where the invisible weight of countless journeys lingers in the air. Aldwych Station, quietly waiting beneath the city, holds its place as the station that never closed, not because trains run there anymore, but because it refuses to be forgotten. Asterisk, in the early days after closure, Aldwych Station stood almost untouched. The gates were drawn, the last train had gone, but inside, everything remained. The signs still pointed to exits and platforms. Dust settled slowly over benches, the ticket office glass still smudged by the fingerprints of the final. Commuters. Telephones hung silent on the walls. It was as if the station was simply waiting for the next service to arrive, the next shift to begin. Access was restricted, of course, but that never stopped stories from leaking out. Contractors brought in for maintenance spoke quietly of a tension they couldn't explain. One man remembered working alone in a northern tunnel, setting up lighting for a documentary shoot. He swore he heard the faint clatter of high heels behind him, measured, deliberate steps across the tiled floor. But when he turned, the tunnel was empty. He laughed it off, at first blaming the echo or the city sounds bleeding through. Later, checking the tape, the sound had been captured, faint but unmistakable. Walking away from the camera, even though no one had passed. Another former employee once described a moment late one evening while locking up after a training session. He was heading for the stairs when the overhead lights flickered and dimmed. Not unusual in older tunnels, but the pause that followed felt different. The silence had weight to it. Then came the soft sound of a train knot roaring in, not screaming, along the rails, but gliding. A distant hum growing slightly louder. There was no scheduled movement on the line, no light, no vibration, and yet the sound remained for several long seconds before fading again into stillness. None of these accounts are dramatic. No one fled the station. No one was harmed or haunted in the usual sense. But there's a thread running through them, all a quiet unease, a sense that Aldwych remembers being alive and hasn't yet accepted the stillness forced upon it. Those who return say it's not fear they feel down there, but presence, an alertness in the walls. You become hyper-aware of your own footsteps, your breath, the way your voice sounds when you speak. Conversations are often reduced to whispers, not because anyone asks you to be quiet, but because the space seems to demand it. To speak too loudly would feel like a violation, as if you might stir something better left undisturbed. And yet, the station doesn't repel people, redraws them in. Urban explorers, filmmakers, maintenance crews, even historians find themselves returning, not just for work, but out of a strange pull they can't quite explain. There's a subtle gravity to Aldwych, as if the station itself is aware of those who remember it. Asterisk, in the early days, after closure, Aldwych Station stood almost untouched. The gates were drawn. The last train had gone, but inside, everything remained. The signs still pointed to exits and platforms. Dust settled slowly over benches. The ticket office glass still smudged by the fingerprints of the final commuters. Telephones hung silent on the walls. It was as if the station was simply waiting for the next service to arrive, the next shift to begin. Access was restricted, of course, but that never stopped stories from leaking out. Contractors brought in for maintenance spoke quietly of a tension they couldn't explain. One man remembered working alone in a northern tunnel, setting up lighting for a documentary shoot. He swore he heard the faint clatter of high heels behind him, measured, deliberate steps across the tiled floor. But when he turned, the tunnel was empty. He laughed it off, at first blaming the echo or the city sounds bleeding through. Later, checking the tape, the sound had been captured, faint but unmistakable. Walking away from the camera, even though no one had passed. Another former employee once described a moment late one evening while locking up after a training session. He was heading for the stairs when the overhead lights flickered and dimmed. Not unusual in older tunnels, but the pause that followed felt different. The silence had weight to it. Then came the soft sound of a train knot roaring in, not screaming, along the rails, but gliding. A distant hum growing slightly louder. There was no scheduled movement on the line, no light, no vibration, and yet the sound remained for several long seconds before fading again into stillness. None of these accounts are dramatic. No one fled the station. No one was harmed or haunted in the usual sense. But there's a thread running through them, all a quiet unease, a sense that Aldwych remembers being alive and hasn't yet accepted the stillness forced upon it. Those who return say it's not fear they feel down there, but presence, an alertness in the walls. You become hyper-aware of your own footsteps, your breath, the way your voice sounds when you speak. Conversations are often reduced to whispers, not because anyone asks you to be quiet, but because the space seems to demand it. To speak too loudly would feel like a violation, as if you might stir something better left undisturbed. And yet, the station doesn't repel people, it draws them in. Urban explorers, filmmakers, maintenance crews, even historians find themselves returning, not just for work, but out of a strange pull they can't quite explain. There's a subtle gravity to Aldwych, as if the station itself is aware of those who remember it. Asterisk, Aldwich's peculiar stillness never turned people away for long. In fact, over the years, more and more requests came in, not just from filmmakers wanting a slice of period authenticity, but from sound engineers, historians, even musicians. They were drawn to the acoustics, the mood, the way sound lingered, longer than it should, held in the arched brickwork like breath in the lungs. There was something about the silence that wasn't empty. It felt full thick with old conversations, movements, thoughts that had settled into the space like dust. Engineers would record long stretches of nothing, only to find, on playback, the faint suggestion of murmurs. Not words, not voices, exactly, but tonal shapes, like memory turned into sound. One project never released was a set of recordings taken over 3 nights in different corners of the station. The artist later described it as trying to record the mood of the building. What he captured, he said, didn't frighten him, but it did stay with him. It followed him in quiet moments, late at night. A tone that never quite left. Perhaps the most fascinating part of Aldwich's legacy is how its mystery never asks to be solved. There are no grand revelations, no hidden rooms with dramatic answers. Everything strange about the station remains, just on the edge of understanding small details, odd sounds, moments of displacement, a sense of déjà vu that passes before you can put it into words. It never pushes, never demands. It just stays. For those who worked there, there's a quiet bond of recognition in one another's eyes. It's not something dramatic or sinister, but a shared understanding that they've stood in a place where time behaves differently. Some describe it like being underwater. Others say it's like stepping into someone else's memory. There's no consensus, but no one ever says Aldwych felt empty now. As decades pass and the city continues to grow above, Aldwych remains below, unchanged. The escalators are locked in place. The signs still point to exits that no longer exist. The benches remain, smoothed by time and use. There are no passengers now, no trains. But the station holds its shape. When people leave, they don't always feel relief. Sometimes they pause at the top of the stairs, glancing back at the closed doors as if waiting to hear something, one last footstep, one last whisper. But the doors stay shut. Aldwych has shared what it wanted to, and the rest it keeps. Asterisk, what makes Aldwych so unforgettable isn't what happened there, but what never quite stopped happening. It's the way the past lives quietly in the corners. The way the silence holds your attention, asks nothing of you, but somehow leaves you changed. In a city that moves at relentless speed, where things vanish and reappear overnight, Aldwych is a rare constant. It doesn't need trains to be a station. It doesn't need crowds to be alive. Its story continues simply because people remember it, because every now and then someone thinks of the station beneath the Strand and wonders what it looks like. Today, whether the tiles have cracked a little more, whether the air still smells of dust and stone, whether the faint trace of movement still echoes through the tunnels, and sometimes someone finds their way down. A crew, a caretaker, a guide with a small group of curious visitors. The lights flicker on, one by one. The air stirs. The silence shifts, ever so slightly. The station listens, welcomes, then returns to rest. There's comfort in that, the idea that some places don't vanish when we stop using them. They simply wait. They become part of the city's hidden rhythm, not erased, not forgotten, just quiet, present. So if you ever walk near the corner of Strand and Surrey Street on a gray afternoon, and the rain begins to fall just light enough to hear it in the distance, you might pause without knowing why. You might sense something beneath your feet, a quiet presence, a breath between heartbeats, and somewhere far below, in the cool, still air of Aldwych Station, something might shift softly, gently, almost imperceptibly, as if to say, "I'm still here."